Okay, so welcome to this evening's presentation for the WomenNC Leadership Training Program. This evening, we're going to talk a little bit about this program, and you have the great benefit of being able to hear from three of our most recent scholars from NC State talk about their experience. And then we'll spend a lot of the time talking, just answering questions that you all have. And then at the end, we'll just do a little wrap up of some next steps. So to begin with, this program is a program that is a partnership between WomenNC, which is a local nonprofit in the area that's focused on advancing gender equity in North Carolina and building leadership development of young adults in that pursuit. And one of the big areas in which they do this work is through this leadership development program that's part of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. And so what this entails is, they work with a number of universities across the Triangle area, and NC State has been a partner with them, I believe, for about 11 years in this program. This coming academic year that's about to start in the fall, we will be sponsoring 3 students from NC State to take part in this program. And it will last the entire academic year and will actually start in the summer. So for folks who are not graduating, you are eligible to participate in this program. And the program itself is fully funded. There is no financial commitment on the scholars' part. And it's funded by a couple of different offices here at NC State, including the Women's Center, which is part of the Office for Institutional Equity and Diversity. It also is funded by Student Leadership Engagement, the Office of Global Engagement, and then the colleges from which the scholars are selected also are financial sponsors of this program. So what the program entails is kind of spelled out in the box on the right. So essentially, scholars who are selected for this program are going to identify and investigate a specific issue of gender disparity in North Carolina. And over the course of a series of 5 workshops and biweekly meetings with a mentor, you will design and conduct an independent social science research project, again, with the help and guidance of a mentor from the RTI Global Gender Center. And as part of that research, you will also formulate a couple of different policy recommendations in partnership with an advocacy mentor. And then the culmination of all of this is that you are going to present your findings and advocate for those policy changes at a variety of different levels, including in the local area in the Triangle, as well as the culmination of this whole program is to present your findings at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, which is typically a 2-week conference of dignitaries from all over the world who typically go to New York to the United Nations and negotiate platforms around gender equity and advocate for advances on the basis of gender equity. Of course, during COVID, there's some changes to that process. And we've actually got, Sarah will talk a little bit about her experience actually presenting at the UN and going to New York. And Jackie and Nyla will talk about their virtual experience that will be happening next week as part of that effort. So that's kind of the general overview of the program. I want to share timelines are kind of an important thing. So the applications for this program will open up on Wednesday of this week. And we'll talk on the next slide what kind of that will look like. But students who are interested in this program will have about 3 weeks to work through the application process. Obviously, the sooner you apply, that's probably better. But scholars will be selected on May 3rd. And then you'll start sort of getting to know the other scholars in your cohort, getting connected with the other partners, But the program itself will start this summer. So the 2 of the workshops will occur over the summer. You'll start to develop what the research topic is that you want to work on. And then you'll participate in a couple more workshops starting in the fall and then early January. And then you'll start working on your research with your femtor. First draft will be due in November, final draft in December. And then you see the spring is really when you're doing a lot of the presentation. So the bulk of the work is kind of identifying that research and doing the research in the summer and the fall, and then working on the presentations over the course of the spring semester. And the program itself will wrap up in mid-April. And we have a short little video here that we'll save at the end in case, if we wrap up early, we can show folks a little bit about that video. It's also available on the WomenNC website as well. It just talks through the program a little bit. So that's kind of the overview. And this is selected key dates. So there's other dates throughout the year-long program, but just wanted to give a sense of kind of when the program begins, when the bulk of the research and writing will be done, and then when the presentations will be conducted. As I mentioned at the beginning, this program is open to undergraduate students, and because it will be taking place beginning of the summer through next year, it will be open to anybody who will be a sophomore, junior, or senior in the next academic year. As long as you haven't graduated and you maintain an undergraduate status, you would be eligible for this program. The application, as I mentioned, will go live probably Wednesday of this week, and it will include 2 essays, 2 reference or recommendation letters, and a resume or a CV will be required as part of that process. So I think that's what I have for kind of the overview of the program. I don't know if Sarah, Jackie, or Nyla, you have anything that I maybe have missed about the program. Of course, we'll get into kind of your experiences in just a moment, but in terms of the overview of the program, anything I might have missed that you think is important for folks to know?
One thing that's really cool is you get connected to a femtor. So you get someone who works at RTI Gender Center who is able to guide you in the process, and also is a nice way to network with a really big company that does really amazing public health work, in case that is a career path you're interested in as well.
Thank you for that, Nyla. So does anybody have any questions kind of about the program before I pass it over to our scholars to kind of walk through their experiences? We'll have a lot of time for questions. So I just wanted to make sure there were no questions that needed clarifying before we move on.
A quick question, Janine, if it's okay. I was curious, so this program didn't exist last year, or like at the start of this year when, I was like going into my senior year, I guess, and I was so looking forward to doing this program. So from what I hear though, because of senior status, I'm not eligible to apply for it anymore.
That, and Sarah, I know you're also on the board. I don't know if there have been discussions on the board recently. I know when we talked about this previously, WomenNC's preference was to keep undergraduates so that that there was like a level playing field and we weren't having like undergraduates compete against graduate students, because obviously there's a difference of kind of like research capacity at that point. And in fact, it might have been NC State's decision and not WomenNC's decision now that I'm trying to think about it. But yeah, that's my understanding. I don't know, Sarah, if you all have talked about that.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I'll go ahead and throw my email in the chat. This is for anyone to use, but even if it doesn't work out for this exact program, there could be other opportunities to kind of do tangentially related work if you're interested. So I'll shoot my email below if you just want to shoot me a reminder, and I can kind of confirm with the board. And if this program isn't an exact fit for where you are in your academic career, then we can work to try to find something else, just because I know I would have been really disappointed as well, just given COVID and everything. But yeah, so shoot me an email. We can talk.
Yeah. Okay. Super cool. Because it is so disappointing to miss out on this opportunity just because of COVID happening. And I was wondering too if there was an email to contact the, like, I don't know who's in charge of this, but I mean, I've tried to contact like the email that's like on the NC Women website, and I haven't gotten any responses for, I don't know, I've sent a few emails.
Yeah, just send me an email. That's my personal email, so I'll get back
Sweet.
to you and kind of can liaise. But yeah, so we can talk.
Okay. Sweet. Thank you.
Awesome. Great question. So I'm going to now turn it over to Sarah. Actually, Sarah's going to kick us off and talk about her experience, and then we'll move on to Nyla and then end with Jackie, and then we'll open it up to Q&A for everybody else. So Sarah, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Janine. So like I said, my name's Sarah. I'm currently a graduate student at Duke, but at the time when I did the program, I was in my junior year at State. I studied political science and Arabic and had a minor in social work. So I was definitely coming from a very heavy CHAS background, but I think Nyla and Jackie can kind of speak to some non-CHAS aspects of the program as well. But for any of my CHAS folks, I got you. But yeah, so I was really interested in the program just because I had seen folks years before me do it. NC State, I think on and off had, there have been years where the program hadn't been funded, but it worked out that my junior year, there was funding for 2 scholars. And I was really drawn to the program primarily because of the opportunity to do research. I had been able to do research in certain capacities on campus before or for classes, but being able to kind of conduct your own project and put together those questions yourself and kind of be a PI, so to speak, was a really unique experience, I think, for an undergraduate, because that's something that not a lot of people get to do until they're in graduate school or beyond. So that was something that really drew me. And then also the ability to interact at a political or policy level. So obviously doing an MPP right now, this program really helped me kind of clarify what my interests were. At the time when I started the program, I actually was a social work major, so was looking to go into direct service, but wasn't really sure that was for me. But after doing this program, I really recognized that policy was my primary area of interest and where I saw myself using my skills to benefit society at large. But so my year, we got to pick any topic. There wasn't a theme really within WomenNC. And I know Jackie and Nyla's experience is a little bit different, but so for mine, I chose an issue that I had seen come up a lot, had some personal interest in, and that was looking at period stigma. And so specifically, I ended up narrowing my question down to, okay, it's been a minute since I've talked about this. I was like, okay, wait, what was my question? So my topic was about looking at menstrual hygiene products within higher education spaces. So looking not only at availability of products and access to them, but then also how being a menstruator on campus can affect your educational experience. So I did a survey of NC State students where that was really cool, and was able to kind of glean some of the things that I had known from, being in conversation with fellow students and folks at other campuses, but wasn't really being shown in the data that I was looking at. And across the board, it was found through the survey and then also just through one-on-one conversations with different stakeholders that there really was a huge gap in terms of these services being provided to students and how that impacted folks' educational attainment. So folks talking about stigma of missing class, or having to choose between running cross campus to their dorm or being on time, things like that, just because products weren't readily available. So for me, that just kind of justified why I chose that question. And there was a bit, I don't want to say pushback, but I think folks initially, when I brought that question, they were like, are you sure? Is that really what you want to do? But I was like, okay, no, I know this is something I'm really passionate about. This is something that there still needs more work done on the issue. So pursued it, and it ended up working out really well. And then for our year, we did get to go to the United Nations, which was really, really cool. We went over spring break. Again, this was my junior year, so it was 2 years ago now. And it was really neat. So the way it worked was we got to go to New York for the full week. Like I said, it was one of the 2 full weeks of the conference. and really just sit in on as many sessions as possible. So we were sitting next to people from not only all across the United States, but all across the globe, everybody that had come and, you know, had their specific niche issues that they were extremely passionate about, but overall with the through line of being interested in gender equity and equality for everyone. And about halfway through our time there, we got to present our research. So it was students not only from NC State, but UNC, Duke, and Bennett College in Greensboro. And that was just a really cool opportunity as well, because we had been able to present here in North Carolina and at NC State, but being able to kind of connect with a larger global audience gives a lot more context, I think, to your research and allows you to consider different angles that maybe folks inside your bubble or inside the network of one state aren't really going to think about. So I had conversations with folks that were also interested in looking at menstrual hygiene, but from the perspective of countries where, you know, gender rights are still a lot further behind than the United States. So, you know, school attendance rates being a lot lower, for example, for women and girls that were menstruating, and just kind of stigma about that and stigma about access to things that would allow women to kind of continue with their daily routines and things of that sort. But that was my experience at the UN. And then coming back to North Carolina, there was also a big emphasis on not only conducting this research, but making sure that it was able to land in terms of making sure that there were some long-term implications or some sort of outcome. So for me, that might go into the General Assembly. In North Carolina, one of the things that I found was that there is, as in many states, there's an increased sales tax on menstrual hygiene products. As many of you guys probably have heard about, it's become more and more common if you're into gender equity spaces, but it is something called like a luxury tax. So it's taxed at a higher rate than other necessity items or other medical items. So talking to members of the General Assembly about things of that sort, and just being able to connect again with more folks that had the ability to do things that I, as a student, was not, but being able to bring them that sort of data to support the claims that I was making. So not only, you know, were we having claims come from other countries or from other parts of the United States, there were people right here in North Carolina that were suffering because of policies that were put into place. And, you know, with that, they should be able to do something. And so after my time at being a WomenNC Scholar, like I said, it really promoted, for me, my interests in both in research and policy. So I've gone on to work for the North Carolina General Assembly, worked at North Carolina Department of Administration. Now I'm at Duke, looking more at broader social policy issues, so intersections of gender and race and how they impact different social services. But yeah, that's my experience. And again, open to any questions if I left anything out, Janine. But just overall, it was a really great experience and helped solidify for me what my long-term plans and goals were, and kind of where I could fit my skills in best in this advocacy space.
Thanks, Sarah. Nyla, do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, so I came in first as someone who's gotten to attend a different UN conference. So my junior year, I got to go to the Conference of Parties, and that's the one where the Paris Agreement was made. So I got to go to Poland in the middle of finals time and try to advocate for youth to be included and for underserved communities to have a voice and a platform. And we even successfully were able to make a protest during the former president's coal talk, and kind of lead the media away from that. So that experience really made me want to go to more of these kind of venues and spaces and see how can I go to the UNCSW. And so that's how I heard about this opportunity and really wanted to be a part of that. Another part of it too, as you'll see in the photo, I'm a former engineer. I guess you're always an engineer. And I studied biomedical engineering, but my courses didn't really talk about what policy analysis is. That wasn't really a part of what I learned. I ended up adding like a CHAS self-design major, but it didn't really give me that background I think I need to really make have that insight to do successful implementation. And any policy stuff I did learn didn't really have that gender analysis that I think is so crucial when you're working. As many of you seen during COVID, gender is a big part of who's leaving the workforce. It's a big guide of like why people might have different reasons to be vaccine hesitant. So I really wanted to learn more about how can gender affect the research that I'm doing. So I decided to focus on gender affirming healthcare at the 16 UNC system universities. For those of you who are unaware, we have the Association of Student Governments, where all 16 UNC system schools and one high school, NCSSM, come together once a month and try to make policies that affect our campuses. So in that arena, I was a delegate for state, and we tried to get the ban removed on gender inclusive housing. So the UNC Board of Governors has this ban, so you cannot live in housing that matches your gender identity. And so one of the things that conversation made me realize is what other ways do policies in our system affect the health of transgender students? And so looking at gender affirming care, it's what policies, trainings are in place so that people who work in these facilities can best support transgender students and have the resources and know-how to really treat them with the proper respect and dignity they need as they navigate a process for a lot of them that might be really brand new. And so, unlike Sarah, I wasn't able to go to New York, but that experience was also really crucial in me learning advocacy and how to turn research I have into policy. I'd gotten to work on the Gen X exposure study, which is still a work in progress. So I hadn't really had that advocacy part and science communication part yet to my research. This is really crucial in filling that gap for me. Now I'm working on incarcerated workers' occupational health. Many of you might see videos or photos of people who are incarcerated making hand sanitizer, working in morgues. So now from this experience at WomenNC, I've been able to do policy analysis to see what kind of protections are in place for people who are incarcerated and working. What kind of money are they making? What is the scope of work? And how can we actually put them in safer and healthier jobs? And turning that finding into what does an incarcerated Green New Deal look like? Or how can incarcerated people be included in our reform of green jobs? So this experience was really crucial in trying to do valuable relationship building. This summer and right now, I've gotten to work with the North Carolina Department of Public Health on their COVID-19 response. And so much of dealing with vaccine hesitancy and making sure the vaccine rollout goes well is about relationship building and you being able to talk to people you've never had before. So sitting in calls with people as we try to figure out how are we going to support migrant farm workers. There's so many different voices and players at the table, and you have to kind of think about how to engage these stakeholders. And these are some skills that you can really learn in these conference grounds, even if you don't get to be there in person. From my experience going to COP in Poland, you can also make some lifelong friends and some lifelong connections for your advocacy work. One of the friends I made in Poland, and I'm sure Sarah's made some friends she's kept up with, she's helping me think about how can the feminist Green New Deal include incarcerated people, or how can we design feminist foreign policies that actually think about environmental justice, because my work is on environmental health. So all these connections you make, you can use them to your benefit way down the line. So it's more than one conference. It's how can you leverage these connections, and also how can you leverage moments like a pandemic to make really big systemic change.
Thank you, Nyla. That's so interesting. Jackie.
Hey everyone, I applied to the program my senior year at NC State. I studied biology and minored in international studies. And throughout my time at NC State, I was really involved in student organizations and spaces on campus that focused on gender equity issues. For example, I was involved at the Women's Center during my time. I was part of the movement, which is an interpersonal violence peer educator group. If you haven't heard about them, definitely check them out. I loved my time there. Just a small plug. I was also involved in undergraduate research during my time, and with my focus of biology, I knew that one day I wanted to have a career in public health research, and so this program just aligned really closely to the work that I was doing involved in gender equity and where I wanted to be in the future. And so it was just a really natural program for me to align to and what my next step was. My research project focused on the risk factors of environmental toxins, so like lead or other heavy metals that could be found in people's homes or in their neighborhood, and the impact that has on maternal and child health. That project was inspired by a faculty member here at NC State. Dr. Catherine Hoyo has done studies looking at blood lead levels of pregnant women in Durham. And so with that contact, as well as the help of my mentor, I was able to collaborate with a local nonprofit and get involved and meet the community that they serve and that is impacted by lead exposure. And so I created a survey that was distributed to people living in Durham that had a high risk of lead levels and measured their awareness and attitudes towards potential lead exposure, as well as look at other factors that were associated. And through that, I found a strong correlation to redlining, which is the practice done in the 1950s of biasing housing mortgages based on race, and also a risk factor of living in publicly funded housing in Durham as well. And so I was able to work with a community that I have never been exposed to, and it really taught me what does it mean to be a researcher that's engaging in community-based participatory research. I also, sorry, I'm trying to think of what the questions were. But like Nyla said, we weren't able to go to the UN in person. But we did participate in a lot of online and virtual spaces to promote our work. So we presented at the Durham Women's Commission during one of their meetings over Zoom, as well as the NC State Gender Symposium. And so even though you may not be engaging with many people on the floor of the UN, there are so many opportunities for you to engage with people and connect with people to promote your research and what your policy recommendations are. Currently, I'm a Master's of Public Health student at Emory, and I'm a research assistant at the CDC's National Center for Birth Defects and Developmental Disabilities, which was strongly inspired, and I probably got that position because of the work I did at WomenNC. The project that I did with WomenNC was my first experience in the field of maternal and child health, and opened me up to that, as well as environmental health issues. And so it's also a really great opportunity if there is a topic that you are really inspired about, but you just haven't had the opportunity to explore it. WomenNC is also great. So don't feel like you have to have a whole bunch of experience or skills or assets, as long as you have the initiative and passion to do work that promotes gender equity. It's a really great program to apply to.
Thanks, Jackie. So as you all can tell, Sarah, Nyla, and Jackie have had amazing experience. And as they've all mentioned, sort of their experience have opened up a lot of doors and helped forge their current educational pursuits as well as their future professional goals. So I think this is an amazing stepping stone for a lot of folks and sort of understanding and identifying kind of their future goals. So thank you all for sharing that. We have about 20 minutes of time left. And I wanted to just open up the floor to a question and answer session. So any questions that you all have that you want to pose to Jackie, Sarah, or Nyla, feel free to unmute or pop something into the chat. And really, this is your time to kind of learn more about whether there are certain tips that they have for you if you're going to apply, or how the interviews go, or how the presentations, or sort of any of that sort of stuff. This is your time to ask. So I will open it up for questions. So there is a question in the chat. If Nyla and Jackie, if you also are okay with sharing your emails, and if so, you can pop those in the chat. And it sounds like everybody is on board with having anyone reach out to them and have kind of offline conversations, it sounds like.
Well, first, I want to thank you all for sharing. I thought it was very interesting and encouraging to actually apply. I just had some question about the application, because I saw there are like 2 essays, one resume, but there's also interviews, right? Okay.
Yeah, so after you submit your application, you'll be reached out to for an interview, and that will be on Zoom, obviously. But yeah, and then that's it. It's mainly just kind of a conversation to kind of get to know you better, what your sort of interests are, and kind of how you would approach. I think mainly the big thing for a lot of people is the time commitment. So just because they kind of typically advertise it as equivalent to like a 3-credit course. So because you are writing like a research paper and getting ready to present it and stuff, it does involve quite a bit of time commitment. So I think really what the members of the board are trying to see are just like, okay, how committed are you to this? What sorts of I guess time management skills do you have in place to be able to take on the scholarship and things like that. But yeah, it's really just a way to get to know you better and see how you fit in.
Okay, great, thank you. And also I had one question, sorry, I'm asking a lot for, I think it was Jackie. You talked about one, probably a nonprofit called The Movement. Is that in NC State, or is that apart from the university?
Yeah, that's in the Women's Center. Janine's smiling right now. So that's a student group in the Women's Center. It's called The Movement. It's a group of peer educators. So you'll receive training and skills on how to conduct workshops based on interpersonal violence. It's a really great group. I think they have applications at the beginning of each semester in which you can apply. It's a pretty, they're pretty inclusive and welcoming. They're just making sure that, you have the time commitment and that you're invested in the program. But it's a really great opportunity to get involved in gender equity work outside of this program and on NCC's campus.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sarah, you have another question in the chat.
I didn't see it. Okay.
If someone's planning to study abroad next year, should they still consider applying?
That's a good question. Honestly, I'm not sure of the answer, but I can get back to you on that. I think they would, well, yeah, I'd have to ask, because I think in normal years it would kind of be, it would be a situation where, obviously because we'd be meeting in person and stuff, it wouldn't really work for you to study abroad. But I don't know if, given that things will be virtual in the fall. Yeah, so let me ask. That's actually a really interesting question, because this would be kind of the only time where that would ever work, just because of Zoom and stuff. But let me ask and get back to you. Maybe Janine, I can give you that answer, and maybe you could share it with folks. Cool. And then Brooke said, biggest thing you took away from your experience. I can go since I'm already talking, but yeah, the biggest thing I took away was just, I mean, that's okay. It's hard to narrow down one thing, but I will say, Nyla kind of alluded to this, but the people I was able to meet during my time, not only at the UN, but just even these conversations I got to have with folks in North Carolina. So for example, the woman that's in the picture with me, Jada, she's still a really, really good friend of mine. She was the other scholar my year from NC State, and we're still really good friends now. My femtor at the time was Brittany. She also worked at RTI, and she was a great resource. You know, was not only someone I connected with professionally and from a research perspective, was just also just a really cool person to get to know. So I think it's really, obviously the program is really beneficial in terms of all these different skills that you build, public speaking and writing and research and all that good stuff. But I would definitely say that the connections that I made while a member of WomenNC and a scholar have really carried forward and have been a really big takeaway for me from this program.
My biggest takeaway actually came from my research experience. So like I said, I collaborated with a nonprofit and went to community meetings that they were a part of, and were kind of welcomed or invited into community spaces that I otherwise would not be. And since the community or population I focused on were people living in publicly funded housing, it was something that brought me out of my comfort zone. And now as a Master's of Public Health student and thinking about my role as a researcher in the research process, it really provided me a reflection point of, you know, what does it mean to research communities that you're not a part of? And how do you like come to terms with that idea of like coming into communities and then leaving, and how do you break that cycle that so many researchers have of just like taking information from these communities and not giving it back? And what I love too about the WomenNC process is the focus on the translational aspect of like, you're not just doing this research project to fulfill a capstone requirement or whatever. You're focusing on how can I use this research to have a policy or some other intervention. And so with that too, throughout my program as a graduate student, is how am I connecting the research that I want to be a part of or want to do as my career into actual like seeable change.
You've also now seen me switch from my laptop to my phone. So what I want to point out that I learned is the importance of communicating your research in so many different methods. As an engineer, I learned how to do a journal article, like a research paper, things that like a layperson would not want to read. So this experience, you have to design this kind of like little brief flyer that you can hand out to people when you go there. And that I think really helps me think now about how do I need to communicate my findings. Like I'm working with this team in Massachusetts to address vaccine hesitancy. And so we're like, okay, what tweets can we write to answer people's questions? Because a lot of them might see a tweet and read that instead of reading a boring FAQ on a government website. Or even my professor at Harvard, he does all these op-eds he writes, he goes on CNN all the time. So it's really thinking about how is the best way to communicate with your audience and go where they are instead of you thinking they're going to go where you are.
Thank you all. Those were really very different lessons and things to take away that were really, I think, descriptive of kind of the impact of the program and how holistic it is. So I appreciate that. What other questions do you all have? Maybe I'll take the facilitator's prerogative here. And I know something that's come up when we've done this session in the past is, and I alluded to it a little bit earlier, like what kind of tips do you have for applicants when they're applying? You know, I know we, as the Women's Center, often say, you know, there are 2 reference letters that you need. It's really important for you to ask for those early in the process so that you make sure you get the time and if you're going to faculty members or other folks who have really busy schedules, that you're actually reaching out to them soon so that you're not waiting until 4 days before the application. So that would be one tip I would throw out. But I don't know if Jackie, Sarah, and Nyla, you have other tips that you would share for how to navigate that application process and how to be a competitive applicant.
Yeah, I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head with specifically when it comes to the reference letters. I think too, this is also just kind of a general life rule, but ask for letters from folks that know you pretty well. So even, you know, it doesn't necessarily have to be the most impressive professor or internship coordinator that you know, like as long as it's someone that has worked with you, can speak to your passion, to your drive, to your skills and abilities. I think that's a lot more important to folks reading your application than a title. And then in terms of when you're writing your essays and crafting your resume and things of that sort, like I mentioned before, I think the ability to demonstrate time management, things of that sort are going to be really important. So if you're able to give examples, for instance, if you've had past semesters where you've juggled, say, an internship and like a full course load or something of that sort, or any other sort of leadership roles, things of that sort that can kind of speak to your ability to time manage and deliver on agreed upon deliverables, just because I think it is one thing to be able to say, like, I'm good at time management, but if you're able to show, well, I've done this in the past, and, you know, can kind of show those as evidence. And then my last tip would just be to let your passion really shine through. So if there is one issue that you are super passionate about, and I think too, what we've seen from each of us kind of talking about our topics is what we think of, I think, when folks talk about gender equality, your issue doesn't necessarily have to be like pretty much any issue. I think you can tie back to gender equity. So if you're really interested in immigration, for example, there's going to be a gender component there. If you're interested in, I'm doing a project right now on agricultural credit, and that sounds so unfun, but there definitely is a gender component there, since a lot of farmers and ranchers aren't women and have historically been prevented from access to credit opportunities in that space. So I think it really, you can be as creative as possible as long as you can kind of tie that back to the mission of WomenNC. But I think just choosing things that you're passionate about as opposed to what you think will look impressive is kind of always a general good rule of thumb to go by, just because folks are able to see when you're talking about something that you are knowledgeable about, things that you have put a lot of thought into, as opposed to things that you think will impress them. That to me would be a lot more important. But I don't know if Jackie, Nyla, if y'all have any other tips to add.
Yeah, I can go. On your piece about time management, I know y'all have heard that a couple times today, but it's for them to know you can do it, but it's also for you to know you can do it. Because there's already like still a pandemic going on. So don't be afraid if you have to do this research project another year. Don't feel like, oh, I have to do it this one, so it looks good on my resume now. Like, it, in theory, it's not going anywhere. So thinking about, can you actually handle it, is very vital, because you want to do a good project. You really want to make this conference the best experience for you. So thinking about that as well. And when you're writing your essays, really think about how you want to use this experience. Today, we've highlighted some of the ways that we gain from it and learn from it. So if any of those lessons or skills really stuck out to you, write about that. Write about how I want to be able to write policies. I want to be able to go to communities and do this relationship building. But really also do show that passion that you have for a project, like Sarah said, and tell your recommenders about your passion. Because your recommenders, yeah, they can speak really well to what you've done, what you do. But if you're like, I really care about food insecurity, share your essays with your recommenders ahead of time, so they too can talk about your experiences on that issue. So it isn't just you rambling that you like it, it's them being able to back you up too, because it doesn't hurt to have that extra validation.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah and Nyla. The only thing I would add or emphasize is when you're writing your essays, highlight a time that you showed initiative in a work or a cause that you're passionate about. Because like Sarah said, like you have the ability to choose any topic that you want. And then from there, it's on you. You have people to support you and help you, but it's also on you to reach out for help or ask when you need it. And there's so many opportunities with this program. And so you have the opportunity to take it as far as you want to go. And so I would just highlight what initiative you have for something that you're passionate about.
Yeah, I was just going to add one more thing that kind of came to mind while we were talking, because, and this is something I think for me, it still sticks around, and I'm 2 years out from being a scholar. Don't let imposter syndrome or lack of previous experience prevent you from applying. If you think you have the wherewithal to do it and you're able to make that commitment, I say go for it. When I applied to this program, I had some on-campus experiences and things like that, but hadn't really had any research experience, say like outside of class. I had never been a research assistant. I never interned in the policy space. Like all of that came after my WomenNC experience. So don't feel like just because, okay, I haven't interned, in the White House, or, it doesn't have to be like you don't feel intimidated to apply just because you think that your experiences aren't impressive enough, because I assure you they probably are. And really any experiences are valid. So whether it comes from, even if, especially if you're in the earlier spectrum of your academic career, like even if you want to reflect on things you did in high school, like I think that's totally appropriate. Or even if it was, clubs, campus involvement, even if you've worked jobs, like I know I wrote about in my application, I worked part-time at a pizza restaurant and talked about, okay, I was able to juggle full course load and would run after class and go make pizzas for hours on Friday afternoons. So it doesn't have to be this thing where like I've interned in 5 congressional offices. Like, it doesn't have to be this big to do, just as long as you're able to show these sorts of skills and this commitment. It doesn't have to be like, don't let that sort of thinking be a barrier for applying.
Yeah, I would also add to that. You don't have to have your topic or your project figured out when you're applying. When I did the application, I don't know how it is this year, but there was a question of like, what would you do if you were a WomenNC Scholar? And my project was nothing like what I put in my essay. They're just making sure that you have that thought process. So there's no commitments in your essay. They just want to know more about how your brain works. So don't feel like you have to have it figured out. You'll have a whole month or so to explore and talk to your mentor about what your project would be.
I have a question about the 2 essays we have to turn in. So we agree this is essay about research we've done, or is this kind of like cover letters?
Yeah, so when you'll see the application, and there'll be like specific questions. So it's a little less like a cover letter in that there'll be like a specific prompt to answer to, and there should be like a word limit. So it's not like a super long essay or anything, like not more probably than a page for each one. But yeah, so there'll be like a specific question kind of asking, your thoughts on this, or what, just it'll be a specific question for you to answer, if that makes sense.
Okay.
But yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Any other questions that folks have while you've got 3 amazing scholars here to pick their brains? Okay, I'm gonna show us a couple of other things. So I know a lot of folks had to hop off. Those of you that are still on, and folks who may watch this recording later, this website, the WomenNC website, is where you will find the applications. They should be going live probably this Wednesday. So definitely try to go visit the website by the end of the week, and that way you can actually look at what the application essays entail. And you'll have until April 4th to make your application. So again, the application doesn't have to be rocket science or anything. You don't have to have everything fleshed out, but do make sure you're kind of keeping in mind the deadlines and reaching out to folks around the reference letters. And then one other thing that may be helpful as you all are thinking about your applications is actually on next Tuesday, the 16th. This is going to be the virtual component of the UN meeting this year, where you can actually hear about the current scholars' work. So Jackie and Nyla will also be presenting as part of that on their actual research, if I'm not mistaken. Is that's the focus, right? You'll be talking more about like what you researched in the project. So, you know, they gave a little bit of a teaser about kind of what they looked at, but you'll learn more about their advocacy and their findings at that opportunity. It will be streaming on Facebook Live from 10 to 11:30, and the link is there as well. And what I can do is I will, once I've got this recording downloaded, I can send it out along with these links to everybody who registered. And then we'll also probably put it on the Women's Center's website as well. So that way you can go back and reference it, or you can share with other folks that you know that weren't able to join us today. So just one more checkpoint. Anyone have any more last minute questions that you wanted to ask?
I have some, but maybe a bit off topic, so maybe I can keep it to the end. So.
Well, this is the end. So
Okay.
yeah, feel free to throw those out there.
Yeah, it was more about the Women's Center itself. So I'm new here in NC State, and I know nothing about that. And I have sent already 2 times, you know, the Google Doc we have to fill in, and I didn't have any answer. So I would just like to check if it's normal, if I have to like actually go to the Women's Center.
So I'm going to pop my email in here. You can, I'm not sure exactly what you emailed about, but you can just email me directly and I can get back to you. We and we can talk more offline kind of about what our programs are and things of that nature. Since it is COVID, we're not physically in our space right now. But we are doing all of our programming virtually, and I can send you, I'm going to pop in here our newsletter sign up. And I don't know if you've already tried to sign up for that, but that's also a good way to kind of stay up to date with what we're doing.
Yeah, I did sign up already.
Okay.
So, but thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then I will reach out to you. So
okay.
To learn more.
Great.
Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, I just want to thank Jackie, Sarah, and Nyla again for sharing their experiences with us. And they've graciously put their emails in the chat. So anybody who wants to follow up and ask them direct questions, feel free to do so. They are all like active students in really incredibly impressive and tough programs. So they also are in the midst of a lot of midterms and things, just as you all are as well. So give them a little bit of grace if they don't get back to you right away. And then, yeah, go check out the WomenNC website for the application and get your applications in. So thank you all so much for joining tonight, and I wish you luck.
Thanks, Janine.
Thank you, everybody, for sharing.
Thank you all. Have a good night, everyone.